everyone. This is Samuel Collins, your coding and billing expert for acupuncture, specifically the American Acupuncture Council Insurance Information Network and seminars. Bringing you another episode of To the Point, but more so, let's get to the point to keep things simple. I think often we overdo or make things complex in a way to often make people think their work is harder, hence why people get frustrated. I would say keep it simple. In fact, the theory that I have that we should be focusing on is Occam's razor, or the law of parsimony, which is the problem solving should essentially be simpler solutions are likely to more be correct than complex ones. And I think in many ways, acupuncture fits that very simply. Think of all the complexity we do for pain management, yet if they just use something as simple as acupuncture. That being said, I also want to do that in the way of how you code, how you bill, how you interpret. So of course, acupuncture is a service that we all provide, and depending on the pain, the condition being treated, of course, acupuncture may last for several weeks. There's no consensus over what type of visits, or in other words, the end of the day, the duration of treatment for any condition in general, there should be a reasonable expectation of clinical improvement. Bottom line is we want to show that we're making the patient better, but also we're going to do it in a way of doing acupuncture, but a lot of services. So acupuncture is obviously the main focus, but is acupuncture only acupuncture? Is there parts of services that aren't needling? And so this is where I want to talk today a little bit about acupuncture and physical medicine. While acupuncture needling is the primary care, there may be advantages to using adjunctive therapies to hasten recovery and response. In other words, they can help benefit the patient beyond just doing acupuncture alone. And these services, so-called adjunctive therapies, may encompass services that fall within physical medicine services. By example, cupping and moxibustion, though are adjunctive, don't fit within physical medicine services because there's no specific code. So what I want to focus on is the physical medicine services. However, you do have to always understand your state or where you practice may determine the types of services you can provide. Certainly, you can always provide acupuncture, meaning insertion of needles. But what about other services? So I'm going to give some examples. I'm going to do the 4 areas of the country. In California or West Coast, you'll see here the scope of practice says you can perform or prescribe the use of Asian massage, acupressure, breathing techniques, exercise, heat, cold, magnets, nutrition, diet, herbs, plant, animal. In other words, you'll see from this, it's kind of including some therapies, massage, acupressure, breathing techniques, exercise, heat. So those are things that are certainly within scope, and when being done, there should be ones that you may bill for. You don't have to, but you certainly can, again, within scope. So that's California. But here's the state of Washington. Washington does a much broader statement. Notice here, they specifically get into stating moxibustion, acupressure, cupping, dermal friction, infrared, and so forth. But they go even further, including statements such as superficial and heat cold therapies. And so therefore, it even states just above here, notice Qigong, East Asian massage, Tuina. And so that shows that those all fit within that scope, or within the scope of practice, that acupuncture is not just needling. So those are 2 very broad states. Then we go to Florida. Here's a Florida indication that it talks about oriental massage and adjunctive therapies. And you'll notice here for adjunctive therapies, it really brings in a lot of different issues. Notice air, aromatherapy, homeopathy, hyperthermia, ion pumping cords, iridology, lifestyle counseling. In other words, lots of additional services that, again, can fit within physical medicine. However, let's do the opposite here. Here's New York. New York probably has one of the most restrictive in the sense here. Notice it says in the second paragraph, profession of acupuncture is the treating by means of mechanical, thermal, or electric stimulation affected by the insertion of needles or by the application of heat, pressure, or electrical stimulation at a point. Notice nowhere in here does it really indicate massage or exercise. So again, this would be a state you'd want to be careful before providing a service that service beyond acupuncture is within scope. At the same token, just go right across the border and you'll notice New Jersey has a very broad scope. Notice again the needles, the moxibustion, electroacupuncture, but then take a look here of all the other things they indicate. Acupressure, cupping, gua sha, cold laser, Tuina, and so forth. So what I want to implore you is there's certainly going to be services you're going to provide that are beyond acupuncture that you may do within scope. More importantly, you can also bill for them. They shouldn't be free. They should be services that you additionally should or could receive reimbursement for. So let's talk about what these therapies are. But again, I want to implore, make sure you know within your scope. Now, you're going to say, wow, there's a lot of therapies. Yeah, there's a lot of therapies. But are these ones that we're always doing? What I want to focus on is what happens in a typical acupuncture setting. And therapies come in two types, unattended and attended. So I've given an example of two unattended therapies, the most common. Everyone applies some form of heat. Okay, mostly infrared. Although I like hot packs aren't payable. Therefore, you're better and more likely to get reimbursed using infrared. Of course, you can also do electric stimulation. I want to be clear. The electrical stimulation I'm referring to here is not acupuncture electrostim needles, but literally the pads or surface electric stim. And you'll notice there's two codes. There's 97014 for unattended and also G0283. Now, what are these services? They're both electric stim. Just note the G code is the one you use specifically for federal plans, meaning VA, but also United Healthcare. In addition, we have attended therapies, and the common ones, generally someone in an acupuncture setting is going to do some type of body work. It's not unusual to do some massage or manual therapy, which would encompass things like Tui Na and Gua Sha. Exercise is pretty common. Most acupuncturists do some level of exercise with the patient. And I'm not saying you're turning your office into 24-hour fitness, but you're certainly going to go over with the patient exercises. It could be Tai Chi or yoga or just simple strength exercises. And then, of course, there's another type of electric stim. This is one that's attended, though. And this is, if you're familiar with something called an AcuPoint device. And what I've seen this is a pointing device that's kind of like a pen, but it has electrical stimulation. And what you're doing is stimulating it, an acupuncture point, but without inserting a needle. That would be an attended therapy. So these would be basically the 6 common codes that you might use. And so I want to get a little bit into trying to deal with what those codes are. And you'll notice the 2 codes here for supervised. You'll notice electric stim 97014, that's the unattended, or the infrared. The big issue here is make sure that it notes here, it says application to 1 or more areas. The big takeaway is if you're going to bill an unattended therapy, it's billed for 1 unit regardless of the amount of time. Now, you're certainly all familiar with acupuncture being time related. These services are not. So if I put electric stim on for just a moment, but I also put it on for 10 minutes or a half hour, it's still 1 unit. So you'll see both codes here. The constant attendance one I mentioned was 97032. That's the electric stim that's handheld, that you have to be there. Now, this is one that can be billed for multiple units based on the amount of time, since it is attended. Then we have our other 3 codes that are our bodywork codes. Of course, the 2 at the bottom, 97124 massage or 97140 manual therapy. Now, I want to bear in mind that massage is your simple massage, what you think it is. Manual therapy generally fits more your deep tissue. If you've heard of trigger point work, myofascial release, but I would say most often when I've seen Tui Na and Gua Sha, for the most part, that fits under manual therapy. And then, of course, there's exercise. And I'm not saying, again, that you're going to turn into a gym, but certainly there's no problem with you recommending and having the patient do exercises with you. So at the very least, they can continue at home, if not in the office. Well, let's talk about documentation. One issue you have to make sure you're doing, if you are billing for something or providing a service, it must be documented. So by example, if I'm going to document infrared heat, all you have to simply do is tell me the type of heat, where you applied it, and the amount of time. So real simple, infrared heat to lumbar spine, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, time doesn't matter, but it's put there just so we have knowledge of how much time we spent. Then electric stim, and again, there's the 3 types. Document what type of stim. Notice this one here says electric stim bilateral trapezius, 4 pads. So this is using kind of a 10 style. Notice it puts in the hertz and the amount of time. If it's attended, just tell me what points you're doing the electric stim to with the intensity and time that you spend. Again, none of it hard, just document what you're doing. Massage or manual therapy, document what type of massage or whether massage is being done and how much time. So notice massage, pretty straightforward. Massage, moderate to deep, patient tolerance, lumbar spine, 20 minutes. But myofascial release, you want to be a little bit more specific, or manual therapy. Don't write I did manual therapy, but describe it. Did you do myofascial release? Trigger point. Tell me what you've done. Tell me where and how many minutes. Fairly straightforward. Exercise is just what you think it is. Document the exercises. What exercise? How many sets? How many reps? And if there's any resistance, there doesn't have to be resistance, but if there is, include it. And then, of course, the time. Do remember that this must be attended and supervised. You can't just have a person in a room doing yoga and then you bill for it. You've got to be there with them, making sure it's skilled, that they're doing it safely, doing it properly, and accomplishing the goals you're looking for. So these are the very common things you might be doing that's an adjunct. Do you have to bill for them? You do not. But at the same token, if you're providing a service with time, I would certainly say there should be some level of reimbursement that goes with it. Documentation, however, should be done in this manner. And this is the simplest way, I think. This is my Occam's razor for this. Documentation should be done in a manner that if another provider were to read it, they could duplicate it. So if I were to indicate acupuncture points and how much time I spent, I'm sure another acupuncturist could read it and do it. Now, you may or may not need to spend as much time as I did, but notice you can duplicate it. So with the therapy, you can't just say I did infrared heat, but indicate I did infrared heat and where it can be duplicated. So as a simple rule, when you read your notes, you should be able to read it and then be able to do that service based on what you're reading. If you've done that, you've adequately documented. The only other issue is be sure to indicate the amount of time. Certainly services that are beyond acupuncture may be within scope and should be things that you're providing, because at the end of the day, we're looking to help our patient and ultimately make them functionally better and show that our care is working. We're at one of the best times for acupuncture because of the acceptance and the amount of people beginning to recognize it, but we have to make sure we stay up to date, that we have a consistent way of documenting our services, because documentation means we can be counted. If acupuncture cannot be counted, it will not count. So please do always document in a way that shows the efficacy of services, what the services were, and of course the result. I thank you for the time with me. Again, just go to any of our pages for more information. We always update news and information, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We're always here for you. We're your resource for help. So always reach out. We're here. Next week's guests are going to be Moshe Heller and Stephen Cohen going over some pediatrics. So we hope you join us. And again, I thank you, and I'll see you next time.